Jai Bhim and welcome to all the friends in the Lokayat Conversations. And we have a very, very special guest from United Kingdom today, Mr. Ravi Kumar. He is a human rights defender and an equality campaigner. Has done a lot of work with the Dalit groups and Ambedkarite groups in UK, particularly on the issues of caste discrimination, and has been campaigning against the caste discrimination in the United Kingdom. So today we will be discussing a lot of issues with him. He has his associations with various organizations. He is General Secretary of the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance. That is a big body of the Ambedkarite and other Dalit friends who are working internationally against the caste discrimination, and particularly working on the anti-caste discrimination law in the United Kingdom. So welcome, Ravi.
Thank you, Vidaji. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
My first question to you is how do you came in this whole movement, anti-caste struggle? What brought you in the anti-caste movement in UK?
So growing up as a child in the UK, I wasn't really presented with many caste images as a child. I always knew what my caste background was because my parents never shied away from saying, this is who we are, son, this is our background. And in the middle of our living room, as you would find with many Dalits, especially from the Ravidassia background here in the UK, there was a big portrait of Guru Ravidasji.
Yeah.
And I did question, when I'm growing up, how come you've got a picture of, this saint, this person you revere? And they used to say, well, look, he's our spiritual heritage and we are proud to be who we are. And we don't shy away from it. We don't hide away from it. So growing up in the UK, very multicultural around here, many different cultures. You've obviously got the white British, you've got white others, you've got blacks, Afro-Caribbeans, Bangladeshi, Pakistanis, and many others as well. The Yemeni community in the town when I was growing up, and especially some of the Africans. So it was all very mixed, And the main prejudice that I think many people of color faced was racial discrimination. So we always grew up a bit with that, But during my teenager years, I did come across the notion of caste, especially from other colleagues who were proud about their own caste, who would raise it, who would boast about it. But even then, I still didn't realize what it was all about, what it all meant, I would often think why they were proud about their heritage and what it meant to me in the way that they viewed me, because often it was accompanied with inquisitiveness or a bit of hostility. This is who we are, who are you?
Yeah.
So I used to say, well, this is who I am. What's your problem with it? And with most issues as young men, as you can expect, we often dealt with it with our fists if they ever became an issue. And I always came out on top, really, and of my group, which was very multicultural, mixed. I had friends from all different caste backgrounds and different racial backgrounds. I was at the forefront, the group, in terms of learning, education, and working hard. And so that respect was due. But it always, bothered me why people would make an issue about caste. And I really didn't know about caste. Going to university, I saw more of it there again, where in different societies, and I joined a number of different societies. So I was a part of about 15 different societies. I was quite active in working because I am a skilled networker, but I was a member of the Indian Society and the Sikh Society. And I remember going through to some of their meetings. And again, it came out in the cultural practices around music. People were very proud about their caste and it would become a focal point. And it was an issue of division, not unity. It didn't bring us close together. So I realized it was a barrier. And it was only when I started learning more about Dalit history, Dalit heritage, did I learn the uncomfortable truth about what the caste system was, the plight of Dalits, and how this is a massive form of mental slavery on all people from South Asia, actually, those that follow caste, those who profess to be upper caste, and how it dictates their lives. I started volunteering. I had a real passion for volunteering. And in my early 20s, I started volunteering for my local community. I was doing work for a whole range of charities, helping out with the age concern, youth charities, helping out with community groups, getting involved in my local political party. And I also joined my local Dalit temple, which was the Shri Guru Ravidas temple in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravidassia's experience in Britain has been quite interesting, because when many of them came to the UK in the 50s, 1950s, 1960s, we all worked along in partnership with the other castes. We clubbed together in
Yes.
unity. You know, there was real solidarity. There was no issue of up and down, you know, them and us, because we was in a foreign country and we faced, you know, racial discrimination, which would have been more prominent then. Over time, as families started being brought here in the 70s, late 60s and the 1970s, the temple and Gurdwara movement started taking more pace and started growing. So people were pooling their resources together. Men would put their wage packets, you know, they would give a couple of weeks of wage packets all together so that they could purchase a property as a mortgage, which would then be like a local temple. And we saw this in Smethwick. There's a famous case in Smethwick, and many other people have spoken about this, which was the Guru Nanak Temple, which was set up by all members, different members of the community. And then over time, as people started bringing their wives and their children over, caste itself started to rear its ugly head. So the process of migration actually crystallized caste identities, because and it's a natural response, I would say, in any Western country outside of India now, because wherever Indians go and they face other hostility, racial discrimination, many of them will think, well, you know, how do I relate to this in this hierarchy? Why am I considered inferior? And then many of them will go back to their caste heritage and say, well, in our village, you know,
Yeah,
we
I
were,
understand. Yeah.
yeah, you know, I was meant to be royal lineage, whatever that means, or the head of the, you know, the representatives of God, you know, and
Yes, yes.
you were pure. And so to make sense of what they're experiencing in a foreign country and the racial discrimination, they start to utilize caste and saying, well, actually, this is who I am. I have pride in my own position. So this pride issue comes out again. And there was also a massive scramble for resources, because having served on a temple committee for 10 years, these are big institutions worth millions
Yeah.
of pounds.
Yes.
And on a weekly basis, they would bring in, you know, at a minimum £5,000 in donations. You know, on
Wow.
large events, we were talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds would be donated.
Yeah.
So you've got massive institutions, which is a platform to access political influence, social influence, business influence. You would have access to money, resources coming in, which, you know, all of a sudden is quite alluring. People would think, I want to be a part of that. So caste reared its up ugly head, where people started saying again, well, you're not allowed to serve on the kitchen, you know, because you're impure or untouchable, or you're not allowed to sit on a management committee because you're not from the same caste as us. And that was experienced at the Guru Nanak Temple in Smethwick. And I think that was a divergent point, because that resulted in a couple of the other communities going in their own direction. One of them being the Ravidassia, so the Guru Ravidas
Asama.
Temple.
Yeah.
Exactly. They created their own organization, which was the Shri Guru Ravidas Temple UK, you know, the Shri Guru Ravidas Sabha UK, which then had a number of affiliated temples across the country, with Birmingham being one of the first ones here. And they called it a Shri Guru Ravidas Temple,
Yes.
Bhavan. So they made a distinction to say it was not a Gurdwara, although
Okay.
the religious scriptures were still the same. They were the Shri Guru Granth Sahib. So in all purposes, they were still seeking many respects, because they were reading from the so-called Sikh scriptures,
Yeah.
but they had their Dalit heritage, which
Yes.
was important because it defined their identity. Now, if caste discrimination hadn't been present in the 1960s and 70s, then the Ravidassia wouldn't have set up on their own. They would have been in the same temples. The Ram Guriya, who did the same thing, and
Yeah.
they've set up Ram Guriya Sikh temples, not Gurdwaras, temples, because it was an important distinction, because then they could manage their own affairs. Nobody could come back and say, well, because you're a Gurdwara, we have the right, because of this law in India or that law, to come in.
Yes.
And so it shaped the direction and identity of Ravidassia here in the UK. And I started volunteering for them, and I became exposed to the importance of having their history showcased and being prominent, because nobody was talking them up, you see. And there's all these distinctions when it comes to Dalit spiritual leaders and spiritual heritage, they are not given the same respect as other people. For example, we call Guru Ravidas Guru.
Ji.
Because in our respect, he is a, a Guruji, and he plays that
Yes.
pivotal role within
Yeah.
Sikhism, whereas others may call him a Bhagat and may not give him the same, or Baba, and it's little
Oh,
kind of.
yeah.
So language all of a sudden becomes quite important. So I was being exposed to the differences in how different castes are treated and how they are portrayed in the mainstream media as well. And it was about that time, volunteering for the temple, that I came across the stark and shocking reality of the origins of the caste system. Because first of all, it wasn't sufficient for me. When I used to ask people and I'd say, well, where does this caste come from? Many people weren't sure. Because there's been a varied amount of experience up and down India. The southern Indians may have a very
Yeah.
different experience to, say, northern Indians, who may have very different experience to Pakistanis, and so forth. So there was no clear-cut definition on this is the origin of the caste system. So I started researching, looking into the origin of where it came from, culturally, and how it differs. And when I saw the plight of Dalit people in not only just in India, but South Asia, but outside of India and Asia as well, in Africa, in Yemen, in Japan, and a whole range of other countries. Brazil now has got its own caste system coming up, and this discrimination based on descent, I was appalled by it. And I made a commitment, and I thought, no, I am going to do something about this. I'm not going to waste my time. And many of my colleagues at that time, Vidaji, were going into business, were opening up their own shops, starting up their own businesses, focusing on paying off their mortgages. And 10, 15, 20 years down the line, many of them done really well. Many of them paid off their homes. They're actually millionaires. So for me, it was such an important issue. I decided to give 20 years of my life for the community.
Yeah, because many people feel like you were born in England, and so they felt that you might not have felt what is the caste system, how it operates, because there is a feeling, even friends globally, we all consider Sikhism, say, as a revolt against Brahmanism, because we felt that Sikhism was an anti-caste, a very egalitarian value system, and we all appreciated how the Gurudwaras function, how they help the poor people, how they are in the forefront. But when these reports comes from UK, I felt a little bit of very disturbing, where these Sikh groups, or what you call like, when I wrote about it, somebody wrote to me from Canada that please don't blame the Sikhs, write Jat Sikhs. I say I'm not, I can only say about, I'm not blaming the faith, but what I am blaming, whatever it is happening. And you might have come across a small report, which is like, has come in a just site, a small column in a newspaper from India, that in Sangrur, just in this week time, in Sangrur, a Majhabi community girl, who was just about 10 years of age, and she entered into the Gurudwara, and now she faced virtually a blasphemy. Though we don't have a blasphemy as such as a law, but in Punjab, there is an FIR against that child, actually, this 10 years old child, for sacrilege and for defaming or whatever you say, insulting. Now, if we come to this level, where a 10-year-old child who doesn't even know, I don't think she knows about Sikhism, or she has an intention to, and she has even the access to reach the Gurudwara. And this is so sad. So many times people say that caste doesn't exist in Sikhism. And then they start, discussing how can it come in, in say in UK, where a person like Ravi Kumar speaks so well and is doing everything on his own. So who are the people? Because many times people say they are in a different country. Now it's an equal society. So in that equal society, what is the thing which is bringing this caste? How have you felt it? Have you ever noticed it?
Indeed, I have, and I'll talk about that. And you're right. Sikhism was a beautiful movement. It was a social revolution against Brahmanism.
Yes,
essentially, that's what it was. And when you look at it, you know, the emphasis on equality and egalitarianism is absolutely beautiful. And I'm still, you know, understanding it more day by day as I learn more about it, you know, and in many respects, I mean, if you look at the emphasis on looking the same, growing a beard, having a turban, having the same name, getting rid of caste names, sitting at the same position in the kitchen, so we're all at the same level, bowing before one God because we're all equal in the sight of one God. The emphasis on equality and getting rid of caste is clear. It's pretty clear. And it was like a spark. It was like a spark that happened, like a supernova. And then as quickly as it came, that egalitarian fervor and, you know, revolution disappeared. Brahmanism, if you want to call it that, Brahmanism has been making cracks and inroads into Sikhism for the last 300 years. And it is today what it is in some respect, where caste identities are very strong. You know, you got the OBCs, other backward classes, and Sudras, which are Jats ultimately. And Jats are peasant farmers, they're Sudras, who hold a very powerful position in the Punjab at the moment. And this came out from the British Raj, where many of them were involved in fighting for the British and were giving large land holdings as a result, when many people were talking about quit Britain, you know, quit India, get rid of the British out, you know. So those power relations and structures are still prominent today. And it's a shame, really, because I come across many wonderful Sikhs, you know, and they are sincere people. They're against caste, you know. But then you will get that subsection who have been brought up in that household and have that mindset and believe that they are proud. They don't question it, they don't think it, and then they think, well, this is my heritage, this is my tribe. I've got, you know, nothing wrong about, you know, about celebrating it, and it's in popular culture. And in a sense, they're true. If they really want to, you know, follow their caste heritage, it's their right to do that. But when you're muddying it up in an egalitarian religion, that isn't your right. You don't have a right to claim to be, you know, this caste, you know, or and then claim to be a Sikh at the same time. It doesn't happen. It's, you know, those things are incompatible. And so there's a need for the culture to change. The popular music needs to move away from, you know, caste pride and all of that, because all it does is just reinforce caste prejudices, caste systems, and caste structures. And many of the young Sikhs I come across are lost. You know, some of them, you know, they don't know what to make of their caste heritage. Here in a very multicultural country in the West, in the United Kingdom, where people are living their lives, they're free to do what they want, you know. And then you got somebody who's banging on about, well, this is my heritage and this is my caste. You know, people look at them and think, well, what's that got to do with me? You know, so for them to remain important, people have to make an issue about caste. And so for me, growing up, you know, I had one or two instances of name calling and the rest of it. And as I mentioned, I dealt with them with my fists. But seeing, you know, the plight of the Dalits and understanding, you know, what was happening in India, I made that commitment to get involved. And so whilst at the Shri Guru Ravidas Temple in Birmingham, I started actively networking in the UK, and I came across a bunch of colleagues who were about to come together and form a group, and we were the founding members of Caste-based UK.
Okay.
So we set up that organisation back in 2003, and it was a registered charity in 2004 when we launched. And we went through the whole process of setting out aims and objectives. We were all very passionate against caste discrimination. We couldn't really understand why it seemed to be growing in the UK, whereas here we are free to do what we want. You know, we have, you know, incredible careers. Many of us, we're all professionals, and then all of a sudden you got this baggage where somebody's saying, "Oh, hold on, you know, I'm better than you, and you're beneath me." So we came together to look at what we could do, you know, collectively as a community. Victims of caste discrimination came together to look at the activities we can do. And over time, a number of groups of other organisations have been formed. I mean, some people say, why is caste an issue in the UK? I mean, you've got Caste.UK that's been created here. You've got Dalit Solidarity Network UK. You've got Voice of Dalit International.
Yeah.
And then we formed the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance in 2008. Why would we want to waste our time, money, and resources in doing this if there wasn't an issue around caste, right? And you know, people would say, "You're mad. Why would you want to do that for?" We don't want to sustain it. We don't even want to talk about it. You know, it's one of these things where we'd rather it be confined to the rubbish bin of history, and it stays there. You know, and when people actually grow as human beings, they realise that this was all nonsense. You know, there was no truth. There's no factual basis to caste. It's not scientific. You know. It's not
Yes.
carved out into the universe where you can see the reality of it. It's a concept. been fabricated. There's no such thing as caste,
Yes.
physically you can't touch it. And it's a concept that's come from somebody's mind, and many people have followed with it, and they've enforced it. So we created the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance here in 2008, where we came together. We brought a number of Dalit groups and representatives, and non-Dalit groups as well, actually, because, we realized there were many people, we talked about Jat Sikhs as well before, many more Jat Sikh colleagues, and Jats in general, atheists that weren't in favor of the caste system and then wanted to do something about it. So it was an open group, but generally the core membership was the Ravidassia here in the UK. You had the Bhagwan Valmiki temples. So we had the Valmiki community. We had the Ambedkarites, the many different Ambedkarite groups. We had the Indian Workers Association. So you had the left-leaning aspect there coming in.
Yeah.
They've been very active since the 1930s and 1940s. And then we had the Asian Rationalist Society, Great Britain, which was fantastic because they were bringing a very scientific, a very rationalist approach. And they're very active in getting and challenging backwardness, superstition, in India, and also challenging it here in the UK, because there's many challenges here in the South Asian diaspora when you look at them, some of the backward practices that are being practiced here. So we brought together a coalition and a number of other groups as well that were involved. And one of the first campaigns that we got involved in was challenging legislation. So one thing, we were aware of was that there was no legal redress or legal protection for victims of caste discrimination. If I am racially abused in the workplace, I can call the police and I can follow a process. I can report it as a hate crime, and ultimately I can prosecute somebody, and somebody will be given a, sentence in the courts, because it's in statute, it's in law.
Yeah.
It's the same for your sexual orientation if you're discriminated, or your age, or your gender, but caste wasn't there. So one thing that we did in 2008 was we started our pivotal report, and we went out to a number of community groups across the UK, and we conducted a number of informal interviews and surveys, interviewed over 300 people to gauge their feedback on their experiences on what was happening in the UK. And this report was called Hidden Apartheid. It was launched in 2009, and it's quite pivotal at that time in what was happening. And I'll read you some of the statistics that came out of it. So at that time, we estimated there was 4.3 million South Asians in the UK. That was from the 2011 census. And we estimated that at least 20% would be Dalits. So that would be anything up to 800,000 Dalits here in the UK. We surveyed 300 of them. We found that 9% had missed promotion at work because of caste. 9% had experienced verbal abuse. 7% of under 12-year-olds found threatening behavior, and 16% faced verbal abuse. 10% of the perpetrators were teachers, whilst 42% were fellow pupils. 58% had faced discrimination because of their caste, and 80% said the police would not understand if caste-based discrimination was reported to them. This was shocking, in 2008, 2009 in the UK, that this situation was taking place. And we vindicated what we were doing, because couldn't be allowed to carry on. This is not India, this is the United Kingdom. At that time as well, the UK government was bringing together numerous pieces of legislation under one banner, which was called the Equality 2010 Act. So the Equality Act was bringing all together the previous legislations, refining it and updating it. So we had the opportunity to engage with senior politicians, influencers, and stakeholders to say, listen, we've done our reports, we've done our research, and we're very concerned about what this discrimination that we're facing here in the UK. As UK citizens, we want protection. As victims, we want protection. And the government looked, they observed, they listened, and they agreed with this. And so what the government did was they said, we were going to bring in a clause that depended on future research that the government will conduct. That if caste is present, then it will be one of the protected characteristics. So it would be the same as race, sexual orientation, and gender. And they did that, which was a fantastic, outcome for all the Dalit groups that was a part of this, because the victims finally had a clear path for them to then, have some sort of redress, legal redress. And the sad thing was, two things happened following that. So the government conducted its independent research, under the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, the NISA research, which clearly confirmed that caste discrimination was here in the UK, and that it was experiencing in different communities, Sikhism, in the Islam community, Hinduism, and that, you know, they recommended that legal action, you know, so legislation would be the best way to tackle it. You can either have a big stick or you can have a big carrot.
Yeah, it has to be legislation.
You know, you can incentivize people to stop doing it, or show them the big stick and say, stop doing this, you're going to get fined, you're going to get prison sentence. But immediately we had, I would say, opposition groups. Now, we hadn't engaged with any of these groups today because it wasn't about them. You know, our campaign has always been about victims. It's never really been about religion. It's never been about targeting any one religion. And because the Dalits are from, say, the Ravidassia background, they've experienced discrimination when it came to religious affairs. You know, there was that aspect there. You've got the Valmikis, the Ambedkarites, and all the others. Our campaign was always about the victims, you know, to say, look, here's a community, we want to stake our claim, right? And you're not allowed to treat us in this way, which is perfectly fine, you know? And so we had massive opposition from the Hindu Council UK, the Sikh Federation UK, and the Sikh Council, who came out in opposition to the legislation. And
this is very, very shocking because, you know, initially we felt actually, we know that the Hindu councils are, many of them are now using the academics also for their purposes, you know, telling the Western world that the caste system was invented by the British when they came to India. So these kind of things are happening in UK actually. The intellectuals sitting there in the universities, the caste intellectual I call them, and they are now defining and, you know, writing things, researching, so-called research. And all this research is actually crap, because they want to say that after the British came to India, the caste system only happened because of them, and not, it was not so 5,000 years old.
Totally. And this is the thing, you see, because, well, it was funny because I found that our campaign, you know, it just injected these communities. It helped them organize themselves, you know, in a way that they hadn't done for the last 10 years, you know, and they all of a sudden started strategizing and thinking about ways to how to stop the legislation. So there was a lot of fear there. And the thing is, I mean, nobody can deny the British had a massive impact in India. They may have codified discrimination, but they didn't create it.
Guru Nanak,
no, Guru Nanak and Guru Ravidas and Guru Gobind Singh were actively challenging discrimination. The Buddha himself, 2,000 years ago, the Lord Buddha, was saying we got to get away from this tyrannical, Brahmanical system, right? Caste is rubbish. That was 2,000. It's always been there. You know, when Islam came to India, many Dalits, you know, happily converted to Islam to escape their, you know, their condition. You know, this egalitarian religion came and they said, no, we want to get out of there because why should we be forced into this religious mindset? You know, so caste has always been there. And so I think it's very disingenuous when you have so-called academics in the UK now that want to lay the blame, everything at the British, and not take ownership of what's happening. And all they're doing is they're marginalizing the communities more. They're destroying any solid...
See, somebody sent me a book yesterday, and it's about 800 pages, written by a very big Hindutva ideologue in USA, who is saying that all these discussions are actually Western-oriented, and how the Western scholars are trying to, you know, and then all the whole debate of anti-national and national, all these things come. So these caste scholars, the so-called Savarna scholars, have actually, they have power, they have money in the West now. Apart from the Dalit, everybody has traveled to Western world, and the problem is that they enjoy the liberties and freedom in the Western world, and they export actually hatred back to India. Hatred towards the Dalits, hatred towards the minorities. And it is very sad that this egalitarianism has not come in. And if many people ask me this question, I said these people have not gone to England or America or Canada to appreciate the liberal cultural values. They have come there just to earn money and have enjoy their life. And they become very regressive in supporting all those kind of forces. In fact, the biggest source of the resources for these forces who are like being for the blood of others come from the Western world. And this is a very ironical situation.
It is. And I call them equalities racists because they demand equality for themselves to say, you know, you can't treat me like this racially, and we want our human rights. But when it comes to Dalits or the spotlight focusing on their own discrimination, you know, it's like, no, 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 it doesn't exist. We blame the British for everything, you know. And even Churchill, you know, he mentioned it in the
Yeah.
1920s, saying, you know, these caste-minded people talk about liberty and Hume, and then in a second be talking about how, you know, animal like the Dalits are, and
Yeah.
you know, backward and all the rest of it. And you know, it's disgusting when you come across this, and we've got to really be vigilant against this, you know, and challenge these people and expose their thinking, and that's through the evidence, you know, because a lot of them talk about like you know, it's all evidence based. It isn't, you know, and that's one thing I've been doing. One of the exposures to my own Dalit heritage and history is that it's prompted me and pushed me to, you know, discover my own history. I remember meeting MC Raj. It was a beautiful Dalit writer, you know, an incredible man
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Yes, we have worked together actually. Raj and I
Yeah.
worked together, and he was an excellent analyst and theoretician. Very his analysis of the Dalit lives and history, I think, amazing.
He was, and he wrote. Sadly, he's passed away now. He wrote a book called Dalitology, and I met him, and back in 2006, I think, and I bought the book and I read it, and I was amazed at how rich and cultured our heritage is. It doesn't go back, you know, 3,000, you know, 300 years or something. It goes back thousands of years.
Yes,
I'm talking about the spiritual heritage that we have of all the different leaders, you know, from Dr. Ambedkar, Guru Ravidas, Jyotiraj Phule, and hundreds more, you know, the Satanami Jamars, and it keeps going. And none of this I was aware of, because otherwise you could fall into a trap thinking, oh, you know, you have no history and heritage. Something you did in a previous lifetime has determined your fate in life, which is absolute rubbish. You know, and then when you start to explore and you realize that actually, you know what, we are the indigenous people of India, you know, of Asia, and we've had a rich heritage, right? We have a lot of in common with the Adivasis and the Dalits and the same, you know, and we've faced oppression, we've fought against oppression, you know, and that's why things like the Guru Ravidas temples are very important, because, you know, if they weren't there, they would conveniently be removed from history, just like what happened in Delhi last year in the Delhi Guru Ravidas temple. You know, there was a massive outcry. Hundreds of thousands of people marched in the streets in Punjab and in Delhi to say, you know, how dare you remove our Guruji's temple, because it's a sign of our history, you know, where it's evidence of where Guru Ravidas went and how he engaged with the leader at the time, Sikandar Lodi, you know, and the role that we played. Otherwise, people would delete your history and confine you to the bottom of the scrap heap and say, actually, you've got no history.
yes,
You know, and that's why I say to anybody who watches this video is do your own independent research, look into
yes.
your heritage, learn about who you are, our leaders in the past, our spiritual heritage, and the campaigns we fought, and that you can reach the same independent, you know, conclusions that we have. Is that we have to fight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with it. I tell people, this is I always say that if you see the heritage, the spiritual heritage you're saying, starting from Buddha to Guru Ravidas, to Kabir, to Nanak, then Tukaram, and come to Dr. Ambedkar, Jyotiba Phule, Periyar, and so many. They all are actually, if you combine together in one sentence, I call them one word, they were all humanists. They spoke against superstition, they spoke against hatred, and they spoke for equality. So it's a very rich cultural heritage, very, very rich cultural heritage, and people should take it. Obviously, we have seen like when we deify people, then there is a mystery and mysticism comes in between, and then the whole structure becomes Brahminical. So Brahminism is not merely Brahmins; it actually percolates elsewhere also, and that is
Someone,
why that's why the identity movements, if they don't create a counterculture or culture of these great legendary people, then they will actually be same kind of forces which exploit people in the name of religion, and they create a mysticism around this and avatar and all those kind of things you might have heard. And
Yeah, this is it. I mean, this Brahmanism is the thing we're fighting here. I'm not pointing a finger at any one people, but it is a way of thought. It's Brahmanism.
yeah,
And this is what's been creeping into Sikhism, as we were talking before. And it's this mindset which all of a sudden, you know, promotes that you can't get through life without an agent and God,
yeah,
right? And then we start to venerate statues, you know, and all of a sudden idolatry creeps back in. And it's like you can't do anything without the permission of somebody else. And this is what you have to challenge, you know,
yes,
because you can do whatever you want, you
yes.
know. And Brahmanism, to my extent and my knowledge, hasn't created anything. It hasn't created an aeroplane. It hasn't created a motor car. It hasn't created a computer. It hasn't created medicines. It's done nothing for the mass of humanity, right? And
Yeah,
many people follow it blindly without challenging it. And now we have to now take a firm stance and say, actually, I'm not going to believe in that, you know, rubbish, that complete backwardness, you know, and we reject Brahmanism. And so the work that we do is very important. So the legislation, the government passed the legislation here in the Equality Act in 2010, and we was all very happy about it. The independent research was conducted, which confirmed that caste discrimination was there. And then there was, through one or two other legislative processes, you know, it was brought onto the statute books, and the premise was, we will enable this legislation in the future after consultation with the affected communities. We was
yes,
like, okay, is that good news, bad news? We don't know. You know, the government wants to consult, but it said it's going to enable it, and then they're going to turn it on. Fantastic. And what we didn't realize was that the powerful opposition, the groups,
yes,
right, the Hindu Council UK or the Sikh Council UK, which, as far as we're concerned, probably had the backing of big business. Now we're talking about Britain at the end of the day.
yeah,
Britain, you know, cares more about business in many respects. You know, it's done a lot of work around humanities as well. But when big business always comes first, you know, that's the reality of it. And you can look at what's happening in the world at the moment. Look at the
yeah,
Yemen, right? Why Britain is still selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, where there's a conflict going on. How many hundred, tens of thousands? I think
yeah,
hundreds of thousands being killed now. You know, business always trumps whatever happens. You know, so this consultation took place, where, you know, groups like the Hindu Council UK, Sikh Council were also consulted, and we didn't understand why, because our legislation was all around the victims.
yes, yes.
Then the current Conservative government indicated in
14.
2018, yeah, that they, well, recently in the last 2 years, that they were gonna, they believed that case law, that the existing setup in the judiciary would be sufficient to allow for caste discrimination cases, and they were going to look at revisiting the legislation with a chance of removing it. You know, which was deeply upsetting for us here in the UK, for all the struggle we've been doing, you know, for over 10 years, that the government would bend and fold like this, you know, and come out with rubbish that existing case law would be sufficient, you know. So at the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance, recently, we've been helping 3 tribunals. You
Okay.
know, it's in the news at the moment with what's happening in Cisco in America, but we had some very big ones here
Hmm.
in the UK. One of them reached a conclusion where, you know, the victim, he was working for Tata Consultancy, and he
Okay.
faced discrimination from the Tan Brahms, as they call them, Tamil Brahmins.
Oh,
You know,
here in UK.
very, yeah, you know, and we're talking about individuals that are earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. So they're
Yeah.
consultants, you know,
Oh,
such high level consultants, and they have great understanding. But at that level, caste was rearing its ugly head. And the victim himself had to, you know, pay out of his own pocket to take it to an employment tribunal, which
okay.
isn't cheap here in the UK. You know, we're talking around, you know, easily 50,000 plus, you know, having to represent themselves, you know, not getting any legal aid or any support. And fortunately, he won that one case, you know, and he was able to reclaim his costs. But it just shows you how difficult it is to take a case to court, this caste discrimination case, if you haven't got support. You know, and people who are working on the manufacturing, you know, floors here, working class jobs, and they're being abused. We had another similar case, you know, a woman who'd come from India recently, you know, not much education, and she was being abused by her fellow colleagues from a Punjabi background, and she was being given the menial jobs, you know, and every other day she was being, you know, abused on her caste, you know, called names by men, you know, a woman, by grown men turning around and abusing her, you know, and it brought her on the brink of depression. Like, what am I doing? I'm here in the UK, and it's worse than a village in the Punjab.
Yes. That
Imagine
is
that.
very,
I mean,
that is shocking, shocking actually.
And these are the type of examples you get. I mean, look, people want to marry who they want. I haven't got an issue with that. If you want to choose who you want to marry, if you want to marry within your caste, that's your privilege. You know, that's your
Yeah.
prerogative. If you want to do that, do that. But how dare you discriminate with us on the work floor, in education, at universities, in the provision of goods and services? If I want to go to a shop and buy something or buy a service, my caste has got nothing to do with you. The fact that you're even asking it shows to me that you're mental, that you're insane, you know? And so,
Yes.
like I said, people in that workplace and that poor woman who was brought to the brink of depression, you know, and we provided assistance to her. And it's not easy. We gave her hundreds of hours of support, you know, and she did, you know, she won that case as well. And the company's put in agreements that, you know, you will settle out of court, you know, unless you don't go public. But they
Yeah.
made a change to their own equality policy where they brought caste into it because they realized, actually, you know what, we're employing a lot of people from the South Asian background, and these type of discrimination and disputes happen, and we haven't got any training around it. We don't understand what it's all about. We need a policy to protect ourselves as a business so that if it happens in the future, we can dismiss somebody immediately and saying, sorry, you know, you've broken one of our fundamental rules. You know, so there's a issue of education that business needs to learn and understand,
Yeah.
right, what's going on. And so we're in a situation now where the government has indicated that it believes that existing case law is sufficient, and it may try and remove the legislation in the future. Politics is big business here, and you know, we've seen the Conservatives remain in power. Now, the Dalits, as an organised group, we can start, you know, influencing our own influence when it comes to the next election, right? Because if the Conservatives want our vote, then they need to listen to our concerns, you know. And this was the important. I don't know if you saw some of the articles coming out in how Boris Johnson won the election last year, and they were saying there was a massive swing from the Indian community.
Yeah, the Indian community, the Hindus actually, that we all know that after 2014 victory of Modi in India, that
Yeah.
has changed the whole perception, and the caste Hindus have become quite arrogant at many places in the Western world, and and that is one reason which many people allege it actually, that the legislation, the anti-caste discrimination legislation actually was withdrawn or maybe shelved.
Well,
That that
it was true. When the politicians were standing, there were people actively campaigning, saying, "We will remove the caste
Yes.
legislation and vote for this Conservative MP." So it became a political issue in the UK in election. You understand that? And many people switched over to the Conservatives, and I
This,
don't understand what they're fearing. What are
yeah,
they
but
fearing?
this is so sad because the same Western world, it becomes so if you see the last few months, the Black Lives Matter campaign after George Floyd was killed, there were so many killings. But this year, this obviously that has reverberated everywhere, and people are in great depression. But at the same point in time, because there was a COVID also, but despite and in spite of COVID, you see a massive outrage in the Western world. And the difference last time and this times is that a huge number of the whites, the Europeans, the Americans, standing by the side of the blacks, the African origin people. And that is the what we need also, when we can see that the anti-caste movement, which is should be shared by all. We all need to fight. But why are the Western government not receptive to this idea of caste discrimination as they are receptive to the idea of the racial discrimination? They are very, very, they react. Obviously, there are certain issues, but you know, in the racial question, they are very active. You saw the cricket match between the West Indies and England, and where all the players, you know, had a badge, and then it was a kind of protest, and you know, in support of the Black Lives Matter. Can we ever see such a kind of thing by the Western world, that Dalit lives matter, that we oppose, even if you don't like Dalit lives matter? Can they say that we hate untouchability and caste discrimination? And
I
why
hope
it doesn't happen?
I hope so, and I hope that we're moving towards that. And it's interesting, a lot of the points you just made there, because you're right. There's been a lot of killings by, you know, violent American police in the past against African Americans, but we've not seen, you know, the type of riots and reaction that we have done recently under Black Lives Matter, the movement there. I mean, you did in 1992 when Rodney King was beaten by the police and there was massive riots in Los Angeles then. You've had it in the Watts riots in the 1960s as well. And the thing is, you're right. I think in this instant, because it was recorded, it was live, you could hear a grown man screaming for his life, calling out for his mother. You know, that resonated with a lot of people who saw the humanity in the situation and actually were disgusted by what the police officer had done. And it culminated in everything that we've seen, right? And I think because you had the American white communities and all of the communities that joined in and said, this is unacceptable, then it's led to a lot of the changes, because it's amazing of how much has changed in the last month. You know, here in Britain, you've had a number of TV channels that were considered all of a sudden to be socially unacceptable. For example, Little Britain, where they'd made little characters, you know, sketches of black people, were removed off Netflix. You know, and entertainers had made apologies for dressing up as black people, whereas they'd never felt the need prior to that. So when they saw the strength of feeling and the strength of anger amongst the protesters, that sent shivers of fear down the spines of a lot of the authorities and a lot of entertainers who responded to that and started. All of a sudden, I'm getting emails now from a lot of corporations, big businesses, you know, that are talking about investing in diversity and what they're doing around diversity. And my question was, well, what was you doing prior to this? What was you doing last year? You know, why is it all of a sudden now that, you know, it's become a prominent issue? You know, why were you dragging your feet before? We should never allow ourselves to be in that position. Either you're committed to equalities and you're taking active steps towards equalizing matters, or you're not, you know? So it's a shame that we saw the sad killing of George Floyd, you know, and the impact that's had on the world. And I think it has changed mindsets in many respects, that these things are, you know, are only going to be bigger in the future, and that change will need to become. Now, why isn't that happening for Dalits? You know, why haven't we had our Dalit Live movement? Now, I don't know. These are questions I'm asking about. Funding is important. So I know that Black Lives Matter had a certain amount of funding behind that. But, you know, one of the things I've been working on video for the last couple of years as well, is been working on a united front. And I think we've talked about this in the past, where it's bringing people together from all different communities, different religions, different political thoughts, to build a united front against extremism. We've seen what's been happening in India, as you mentioned, since Modi took power in 2014, right? And the strangling of voices, you know, the ability to speak freely. You've got these cow protectors roaming the streets and, you know, lynching people without any fear at all, you know, and the situation in India has changed, actually, you know, and where you've got academics and intellectuals that are being arrested without any evidence and interned. You know, it's a very scary place. So we're focusing on building a united front to say, let's come together. We've got more in common than we have in differences. And sadly, one of the things I found is that this caste disease, this caste mindset permeates all backgrounds and all political groups as well. And I found some of it with some of my left-leaning colleagues. You know, as soon as I've created a group and I've brought people together, the first thing they say is, oh, we don't want to talk about caste. It's not the same here in the UK as it is in India. You know, we should be focusing more on racial oppression. You know, that's what we should focus on. You know, they want to deny the experience and existence of other people and victims here because they think ideologically we shouldn't be talking about that, you know. And this is something we're going to have to overcome. So people in the left and other groups who don't want to talk about it for whatever reason, right, is they need to overcome this, because if they don't do that, we'll never have our Dalit Lives Matter movement where we'll come together as a united force. You know, and I find that a lot in the left, you know, with colleagues as well, we're very ideologically driven. But the reality of it, you know, the caste systems and structures and, you know, still permeate at the top of the leadership, you know, which is a shame. So, you know, that just shows you things that you have to do. And we're working actively to overcome that, to say, look, at the end of the day, it's fine to talk about caste discrimination. It exists. Even if there was one person in the UK that had been discriminated, let's take a stance, right, from a point of principle. We don't believe in it. We don't want to, you know, endorse any caste discrimination or mindsets and challenge it. We all come together and say, get rid of it, go away. You know, and many people are scared for whatever reason. You know, they think it's taking, you know, and I'm still trying to understand why they do that, you know.
Yeah, because I feel that these are very historical time. Because if the left actually, because they had their all historical misjudgments and failures on this front, these issues, because they've never considered these issues. They always considered issues on the economic line, and so they were out of where the racism was happening. They were out of where caste system, caste discrimination happens. So this is actually a failure of the left forces to understand that there are social issues, and these social issues and cultural issues, that they are much more powerful in terms of discrimination. And if they join hand with the forces of social justice or social change, and they can bring that change. So this is happening in India now. Despite that, there are political things, so people don't come. But there is a realization among many of this left groups that caste is a reality, and they have to speak on this. So that they talk
And
about the
also,
anti-caste movement. So that there is a reality. Obviously, in India we have there are a lot of groups which say that it's not merely just that you speak about anti-caste, but it is also sharing of power on the
yeah,
equal terms. So it's not merely that I am speaking that I am against the caste system, but also when we have to join hand politically, so left forces and all the so-called progressive forces have to actually acknowledge
yeah.
the agency of the Ambedkarites or the Dalits or the OBCs or the Adivasis to speak for themselves and of themselves.
100%. And I want to add to that, which is, when I was just talking about left colleagues here in the UK, I find that many of them are from a particular age group. They're around the 60s and 70s.
Yeah,
So they're old school. They're the older, the communists or the left leaning. And
yeah,
they have, for whatever reason, maybe they're still, they want to protect their own caste interests. Even though they talk about equality. So these are the old school, the old guard that need to go, and I think they will go naturally.
yeah.
They will. And what I've seen in India in recent years, which has been so inspiring, is things like JB and Comrade.
Mm.
So with Chandrasekhar, and you've got Kanya Kumar and the movements there, bringing Ambedkar thought and, Marxism, left-leaning thought together is very important. And, young people watching this, I would say start with the film JB and Comrade, because it gives you an insight into what's happening across India, actually, and what people are doing to look for solutions, because power sharing is important, and me and we get daily alerts on what's happening where, Dalits who are being given land, we saw the news article about 2 weeks ago where the police came in and beat the Dalit couple
Yeah,
and
that's
broke their crops, they destroyed their crops and they had little children, and the Dalit husband and wife took poison because they said, we're going to die.
yeah. It's
So,
such a horrible, horrendous act. Because at this point, I can tell you, I wrote an article on the speaking against the eviction. The United Nations Human Rights Council and United Nations Rapporteur on Housing Rights has spoken and has actually given a recommendation in April to all the government world over to desist from eviction, at least during this COVID period. And they said that it should be extended, the period. So avoid eviction or displacement or demolition of the people who are living on the slums or living on the streets, because this is a very tough time. At least discuss. Obviously, these things are the failure of our state system because they failed. But more horrendous is the thing that you are destroying a live crop, a fertile crop, which is like somebody, some farmers, you say you respect farmers. You respect people who work hard, and their crop you are destroying. It's shameful act, actually.
It's disgusting, and that reminds me, Vidya, something about the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance, who we are, is we're volunteers. We're a non-profit organization. We're not funded. Nobody pays us to do this.
Yeah.
We pay for this out of our own pockets, the amount of thousands of hours I've given, of my life, which if I'd put into a business now, I'd probably be a millionaire, So we do this because we believe in this. And back in 2011, we, out of our own pocket, visited the United Nations in Geneva for the Committee of the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, CERD.
Okay.
Because they were meeting around India at that time, and we wanted to raise the issue of caste discrimination here in the UK. And it was a committee around the UK, actually. It was they were looking at the UK's racial history, and there was a couple of matters being raised. So we went there, we paid for it out of our own money. And what we found was shocking, actually, because there was a couple of Dalit, so-called Dalit groups that have got funding that were there, and they didn't assist us. They didn't help us. Right, we tried to communicate with them, and they were standing there. They were a bit polite, and that was it. They had their hands behind their backs. Right, they had their position, a paid position, and they're happy with the NGO status.
Yeah, that's the problem. That is a big problem actually, because people goes to these organizations not because they want to do something, but because they want to project their NGO as sole representative. Now, a 1 billion India cannot have one representative or two organizations.
Yeah.
You can only speak, and that's good. But to deny people association is so sad. Actually.
It's crime. And what we found, we went there and we had to learn, think on our feet. We lobbied the commissioners, we provided information, and we had a successful result because the third committee called on the UK government to enable the legislation, right? And we had no help from these so-called Dalit groups, which are run by non-Dalits, right? And they have funding. Look at the funding source of where they get funding from. And what we found was the importance of Dalits being there at the top. We have to stake our claim. We have to run our affairs because nobody else is going to do this for us, right? So we have to, raise and nurture our own academics, give them the opportunity to represent us, not have other people come in and snatch the space and appear to be representatives, getting all the media opportunities, so they settle off with some sort of award. And actually the fate of Dalits is still the same. And this happens for all other communities. I see this happening quite a lot, where you have people there who utilize the opportunities and actually deny Dalits the real opportunity to make progress. And this is something we all have to be vigilant about. And
yeah, actually, I don't, it's good that so many people should come, but it's also important to have a joint alliances at these international forums, because it's very difficult for single organization. What happens is that most of the time, even in whether it is Dalit organization or not Dalit organization or some organization representing Dalit, the problem with this donor-led or donor-driven agenda is always like, you try to, be different, and you try to say that, I was the only person there, and these kind of, superlatives on your own self. And then people try to, project that, they represented, they gave, and this happened and that happened. So this is a sad part. I think it's important for organizations and individuals who are working on these things to share their common thread, share a common strategy. Each one should speak, but let them have a common thread also. Only then it will become powerful.
Exactly, and we need that Dalit agenda, because if we don't, we'll get lost.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that, and that's the one thing I've seen in the last 20 years, is that if you're not pushing and enforcing your own agenda, your issues will be left behind. You'll be working for other people's campaigns and other people's issues, and when it comes to caste, nobody's interested. And, so this is a very important issue. And so the other thing I wanted to point out was that in 2013, the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance, we invited Miss Navi Pillay, who was the United Nations. She was then the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Yes. She was working on the caste discrimination, basically.
She did. She accepted our invitation, and we set up a meeting in the House of Lords, and she came and spoke and called on the government to enable the law. What she said was she called for strong, swift implementation of the law to wipe out the insidious stain of caste-based discrimination. Very strong words. And so, at every opportunity when volunteers like ourselves have been given the opportunity to engage with the international institutions, we've had success at the third committee, right, in Geneva, and the High Commissioner, Navi Pillay, responded and came to our request. And it shows you that actually, if you're committed and driven, you can get results, you can get success. We're facing a massive opposition, we are, but these little successes, have all culminated in almost bringing the legislation there. And, and I think a little bit of push tomorrow, there could be a change of government here in the UK. If the Labour government comes in, they might be more, willing to preserve the law and keep it on. So we've got a lot of work to do. And this is one of the other things as a campaigner, human rights campaigner videos, what people don't see is the thousands of hours of phone calls and emails and letters. You've got 650 MPs and, similar amount of lords, and then individually. You got to write letters and ring them. I remember when the legislation was going through the houses, we were ringing lords, you know, and this is at the same time of having a full-time job, you know, and especially if you've got a young family as well, you know, you're giving your life away where you're committed, you know, and so often you don't see this part of the activism or the campaigning, but it's a necessary part, you know. So I think young activists out there, people who want to get engaged and involved, I would say think strategically. You can play a role, and we're always looking for new members to get engaged and get involved, but, you know, certainly do something. And if there's, you know, injustice that you see in the world, don't sit by idly and let it take place. Stand up and take a stand against it, you know. Because
Yeah, but yeah, it's very, very important. But what happens is that, like, when people like you are there who have a lot of, you know, understanding and who are regularly reading, updating with the international laws, national laws, so many things. And there are so many organizations and so many people actually everywhere. But most of the people actually convert the organization uh, for just, it becomes like an identity organization. So the issue gets relegated. So there are so many organizations. So for most of them is like my identity, my historical past, and every community in our part of the world actually have a feeling of a golden past. None of them say that our past might have been dirty also, our past was not very great, but every community has a feeling. So then these identity movements, which are very, very important, but also sometimes when there has to be like how long they hide the anti-caste agenda, because at the end of the day, we have to also work to demolish the caste system, because as long as the caste system remains, the hierarchical order will remain, and only those manipulators will always gain. So what I am saying is, where is the annihilation of caste or anti-caste movement in United Kingdom? Because I've seen the Valmiki Sabha, I've seen the Guru Ravidassia Sabha, I've seen Ram Gadia's group, there are Jat groups. So these are the separate groups. Is there any commonality or common point which you feel that, you know, we all have to join hand to say that, you know, there has to be an anti-caste movement? Dr. Ambedkar actually had visualized once upon a time. Or we will satisfy with our own identities and our golden pasts.
I think there's a massive desire for it. There's a massive desire for people to come together. You know, we have to get past our own individual issues in many respects. You know, like you said, there's different agendas, but in many respects, you know, there is a massive desire to come together, especially against oppression and discrimination. And we've seen that, I think, in recent years with the legislation that was brought in, the national registration legislation last year. You know, many people came out on the streets, what was happening in Kashmir, right? And we've also seen it with, sadly, the rapes that are happening in India. You know, that was a very sparing moment where people came out and said, we've got to stop this. What's with this mindset? You know, and the issues of India are very complicated, actually, you know,
Yeah.
and ultimately,
very
you know,
complicated.
it is, you know, looking from the West, sometimes you could think, why are people raping there for? You know, why so many rape? And then you realize, actually, the gender, you know, imbalance across the country is a big issue. You know, what is it currently at the moment? I don't know. In some parts of the Punjab, out of every 1,000 boys, there was something like, you know, 650 girls.
Yeah, it's very,
You know, so you got 350 boys
yeah.
who are not going to find a partner.
Yes.
Right. And when you magnify this, you know, then you understand that actually what happened. You know, you're trying to make logic of some of the horrific acts that happen out there. And then why is there a preference over boys over girls? You know, then you have to take it back. You know, and ultimately there's always some sort of path leads down caste, you know, caste discrimination. And these are the institutions that we have to dismantle.
Yes.
So I think, you know, this preference over boys over girls, you know, patriarchy, these are the steps that we can do as a united front, where we come together and, you know, and have a common approach, you know, to the common issues that affect us. You know, we all have issues around water in India. Access to water is going to be an issue.
Absolutely.
You know, part of Delhi, water is more precious, you know,
Absolutely.
than gold. You know, it's only going to get worse. You know,
Yes.
climate change. Look at what's happening around climate change. The
That's a
land
big
grab
issue.
that's happening across India. So in terms of commonality and points that we have, fantastic. There's a lot we could be doing together. The issue happens is that when all of a sudden somebody starts saying, oh, we don't want to talk about caste and we're not going to talk about it, you know, that immediately puts people's backs up, right? And it you know, divides us more than anything. And so, you know, at my stage now, the work that I've been doing for the last couple of decades, you know, and when you're in a pivotal position, I have access to communities and all the rest of it. I'm certainly am pushing a united front where we come together, you know, and because you've got so many different competing
Yeah.
identities. The common one that we have to have is one based on humanity, humanism,
Yes.
as you mentioned earlier before, right? Equality of the genders and getting rid of the backwardness mindset around that. And then addressing the issues that will affect us all, deforestation, right? Hunger, that, you know, how many children are malnutrition in India?
Yes.
It's an international crime,
Yes. It's
you know.
absolutely, absolutely. But
Yeah,
the
then what?
thing is that when we speak against superstition and reform, then the biggest, obstacle we face from the religious leaders, and then it all again dilute the internal matter of the community. It goes at like, this is our internal matter. Even the women's issues become internal matter. Because
That's why we can have success here in the UK. And I'll give you an example of another campaign we worked on. We was becoming aware of the big issue of organ harvesting in India. It's happening in China at the moment, in the Uyghur community. Actually, you've probably seen the news.
okay, you go, okay.
Uyghurs, you know, they're organ harvesting, where people in India, what happens? Somebody falls down or something, they take it to a hospital, and before they realize it, they've had their kidneys removed or something, you know. And more people are valued more in their death than they are alive. And what
Yes,
we found was that the issue here in the UK was that you've got a large South Asian community who are suffering particular issues around diabetes and overweight. You know, so there's a big issue of diabetes here in the UK, and over time, organs tend to fail. Now, in the past, people were donating the organs; they weren't subscribing to the organ donation register. So you had a waiting list of about 1,500 people, right? And in a year, because I was working on the campaign, you only had about 50 South Asians that actually signed up. So you had, you know, near 1,450 people who need organs and weren't getting it. And, you know, I did some TV interviews and I said, you know, this is driving the black market in India. And what happens is poor people, Dalits, you know, for whatever reason, they go to hospital, they have their organs harvested, they don't even know. And there was one or two incidents where there was a girl, there was a Sikh girl in Birmingham here. She had dehydration and she went to the hospital there, and sadly she died. You know, she was given a pill, she died in front of her parents, and when the body was brought back, the body had been stripped of all the organs, and it led to a massive outcry.
oh,
So the government here was listening to some of the letters and the campaigning we were doing, and they brought in a legislation which was automatically opting everybody into organ donation. So this legislation will change the behavior of people, because many people now, unless they opt out, you know, unless their families object, then they will freely give their organs to the people that need it, which will ultimately have an impact on the black market and the need for organs in India. So the things that we do here in the UK will have an impact on what's happening in India, right? And be it caste legislation or against backwardness, you know, or against God men exploiting. And there's been one or two of the campaigns we've been, involved in here, which is God men exploiting people, taking thousands of pounds of money off them, you know, because they're going to, cure their superstitions or whatever, you know. So the activity we take here in the UK will have a massive impact in India. So, you know, that's my call to all my colleagues, is that we have got a platform, we've got a united front platform, right? And the anti-caste discrimination has made massive steps in doing that, because we brought so many different communities together. And so don't oppose what we're doing out of fear, because if you think that we're challenging you or your beliefs because we're opposing, for example, caste discrimination or anything else, no, it's not actually, you know. We've got more in common, more to gain in working together as a united force, you know. So the opposition that we've had, I would urge them to have the right thinking, the right understanding, and, you know, which will lead to hopefully the right foresight in what we can do as a collectively, as a community. And
yeah,
that, you know, would be real benefit.
yeah. I always say that thing, that this campaign for justice is not really a campaign against anyone. If some people are privileged and they are just having those privileges for years and years, there's nothing wrong in leaving those privileges.
Yeah.
And there is nothing wrong in, people who are being denied. If they get justice, they live a life of their own. And if the word become humanist, I think the ideals of all, whether Guru Ravidas ji or Guru Kabir Das ji or Buddha or anyone. They all are for human beings, for everyone. I don't think they said that my only these people will follow me or not others. They are all for human beings. So it's a as I said, they have the humanist values, and I think if we need to humanize our people, everyone, we should follow them. There is no ban or prohibition on anyone not to read Dr. Ambedkar or not to read Guru Ravidassi.
Yeah, he belongs to us. Dr. Ambedkar was voted the greatest Indian, in a recent poll. And I've read, half of his books. I haven't read all of them. And every book I read, I learn gems. And to have such a heavyweight, as a role model for all Indians.
Yes,
and I recommend all Indians to read that. And Guru Ravidassi's, vision around Begumpura, which was almost like socialism,
This is he is one of the greatest socialists actually.
Yeah, and he belongs to all of us.
Yes.
So, and I think it's natural for people to resist anything where they feel challenged. I mean, one thing that's come out of this Black Lives Matter movement has been the All Lives Matter, counter protest, where people are for whatever reason feeling like it's a challenge upon them, and they have to resist it. And it isn't. The issue is about blacks being killed in public, African Americans, unjustly, and not having equality. And all we're asking for is an equal playing field. Nobody's asking for preferential treatment, right? And so this is where you get the resistance, where we say victims of caste discrimination have had discrimination. All of a sudden, people feel threatened and they have to come out in opposition. You don't have to come out in opposition.
Yeah, what happens is that sometime when the movements grow, and if the governments and the political leadership doesn't respond to a movement on time, then it goes to the hands of the extreme forces, and that become reactionary. So any movement that is long unheard of by the political leadership will become reactionary, and then it creates a counter-reactionary forces. So it's a very dangerous situation like what's happening in the United States right now, because if it is not heard, it will pave the way for the more frustration among the African American people. And then that, when they take to the street, the white supremacists also start, and they have also started now.
It's leading to one direction, you can see, and the next riots or the next, sad to say, the killing of another George Floyd, what's that going to culminate to? What's going to happen? And the thing is, political leaders can take swift action to condemn.
Yes,
condemn it right away. And saying you've got to stop. We've got to invest in diversity training. We've got to scrutinize the police that we've got in our forces to make sure they're not working for extremist groups, and look at their track records. It doesn't, in the modern world we're living in with computers, it can be done.
I think we need to globally launch this campaign for everyone, the government particularly. How should they recruit their police officers, bureaucrats? They should be made, aware of the international human rights norms, the practices, the laws, and without, respecting diversity and ethnic groups, we won't be able to actually. This will happen everywhere, because now multicultural societies, initially people used to say that I am proud of having multicultural society, but now it's becoming like one against other, and it's you will treat all those who don't believe are not with you, all are anti-national or anything what happens in our part of the world. So this will not take us anywhere actually.
Yeah, and I think one of the positives that's come out of the recent lockdown that we're still in, COVID-19, is that many people who've been at home and all of a sudden realized that actually this could be the end of my life. Many of them re-examined their relationship with each other, with their families, with their communities and their nature. Here in the UK, where it's all very, fast-paced and driven, driving to work constantly, surrounded by diesel fumes, pollution, traffic congestion, people don't have the time to sit down, take stock and think about what they really want in life. And many people have realized, actually, with the traffic going away, the birds have come back, the butterflies have come back, people have been able to think about their exercise and how they want to live and how they want to relate. And I agree with you totally that there needs to be a global movement that presents an alternative, because often all you get is it's us and them.
Yeah.
you know, and,
Oh,
you know,
that won't say, take us anywhere.
no, it doesn't. And that's the situation in many parts of India. You look at what's happening in
Yeah,
Kashmir,
yeah. This is this. Yeah.
minorities, and it's us and them mindset.
Oh,
And at the end of the day, many people just want to live a happy life. They want to live a great life
yeah.
where they're free to do what they want, you know, without somebody, you know, discriminating against them or you know, oppressing them or holding them back. And I think there needs to be a movement around that because it's all about more consumption, more this. And I think in many respects, you know, we have got so much in solidarity with each other, you
Yes,
know, and
yes,
so
absolutely.
the Dalit communities here in the UK, I'm certainly pushing them to say, you know, get involved, you know, embrace what's happening with Black Lives Matter, you know, right?
Yes.
And we support them and support our colleagues there, the Afro-Caribbeans, the African Americans. And then this way, you know, they will also support our campaigns of
Yes,
what we're
yes.
doing, you know, and that
It's
global.
very, very important. Very important.
Exactly. And one thing I'm realizing, things like I know TikTok now and other social media outlets, they're very, very important tools because they're very cost effective. They're free as long as you've got a mobile phone. And I mean, I'm urging and encouraging all Dalits to embrace the digital revolution we're in. And I want you to all, you know, start thinking about being content creators. You know, like the discussion we're having now, it's
Yes.
fantastic. You know, 5 years ago, very few video. You was the
Yes.
one of the first actually. You know,
Yes.
I remember watching one of
Yes.
your interviews. You know, and now it's growing, and so we need more content out there. We need to capture Dalit lives,
Yeah.
Dalit history. You know, and given the chance with TikTok and everything else, where you can start making videos, having a presence, prominence online, which will then present the other side, you know, because often what's lost is the humanity. And if we can
Yes.
utilize technology to say that actually we are humans,
Yeah.
right? This is what we do. This is what we like to eat. This is what we like to consume, right? This is what our culture is, our dancing and everything else, our history, our heritage. You know, we love ourselves. We can use it as a tool of empowerment to help lift us all. And so that's something that maybe we can do in solidarity as well, because some of the videos I'm seeing coming out of the Black Lives Matters movement as well, where people are standing up and talking, you know, and empowering their communities, we certainly could be doing that. And I think that's something we could start straight away today, you know, utilizing media as well. Because for our young people to, you know, because if you're not going to have your history taught to you
Yes.
in your local curriculum or your local school, then we could teach ourselves. You know, there's nothing stopping us, and nobody can stop us from doing that. So some of the work, some of the projects I'm currently looking at is looking at oral history projects, you know, and capturing our heritage, presenting it, and this way we can have a presence and have some prominence online as well. And ultimately, it has to be a tool for empowerment. You know, and that's something I think that could really help our people, because all of a sudden, once you start getting videos, we're quite reactive. When we get videos of, you know, atrocities or people being beaten,
Yeah, most of the time we are actually reacting to the others. So it's like fixing up the agenda set by someone else. So
yeah,
what is like people create their own words, and also it's important to present their vision. So
yes,
without I would say when we read Guru Ravidassia for that matter. So he had created a vision. He was not just blaming Brahminism for everything, but he says, "What is my word?" So my Begumpura, is like this. This is my word. So that what is my word? What
yes,
will be my vision for future? I think that is very, very important. Buddha did that because when Buddha said he provided an alternative, Baba Sahib Ambedkar, he did that. Phule, Ambedkar, Periyar, everybody actually talked about what will we create, like the spaces that we have, how much liberty, how much freedom, how much gender equality is there in the spaces that I dominate or you dominate or our organization dominate. It is important to create, you know, our own Begampuras.
yeah. You know, and the things that people fear. For example, I remember 2 years ago I was doing a campaign after the sad incident of the Dalit mustache, where you had a young person who grew a mustache and he was killed by so-called upper caste people
Yes,
because
yes.
how dare a Dalit grow a mustache? You know, I recently had a big mustache. You know, my mustache, my beard goes with it, and I wish I'd taken pictures of it. You
Oh,
know, and maybe that's a campaign. You know, I could do online, because people shouldn't be scared of indigenous people, Dalits, having mustaches. You know, and you know, I'd like to flood the internet with thousands of
the
pictures of
people have,
mustaches.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you know, in certain part they have, people have beard and
yeah,
uh, this is actually the caste, you know, arrogance. When this
exactly.
comes, you know, like, you know, I can keep, and that's also like a patriarchal.
It is.
So
And the
you,
way to dismantle it is to flood it. You need to say, what are you going to do? You're going to say something to me? I'm going to grow a mustache. Who are you? And sooner or later, the mindsets, right? This mental slavery, which people, even the perpetrators, right? This mental illness that's in their mind, it will break. They would think, actually, what on earth am I doing? If people want to grow a mustache, they're free. If they want to walk down past my house wearing shoes, they're free to do that. If they want to ride on a horse at their wedding, they should be free to do that. Who am I? You know what I mean? And so the perpetrators, their mindset, we should shine, a torch at their mindset to think, why are you so scared? Why are you so upset to see somebody riding a horse on their wedding, or dancing to music, or eating, minding their business, or growing a mustache? What's your problem? And I think so the digital, the space offers us.
See, very, very important is like we focusing on rule of law and asking the officials to be committed to the Constitution of India, because that is the most important thing. If our officials or those who are supposed to implement the law do it impartially and completely in dedication to the Constitution, then these things won't happen. But the thing is that those who are supposed to uphold the law are actually have the caste prejudices, and that's why these things happen.
Yeah, and that is a shame. That's something we've got to collectively look at the solution around that.
Yeah,
and that's why some sort of intervention is needed. And I'm really thankful for Dr. Ambedkar bringing in reservations because of that reason. Because if the that part of the state is from a particular caste, right, and they've got a particular prejudice, then we're going to continue to see the oppression and the instances of discrimination that we have seen, and that's something I think we can also address and work collectively. So I think we can challenge these hierarchies, in many respects, and we've got to start to dismantle, the institutions of caste, right? And I think there's never been a greater opportunity than what we've currently got. So, I would say to people watching the interviews to say, look, think about what you can do realistically. If you're outside of India, in America or in the West, especially, we're blessed actually to be here. Don't neglect your Dalit heritage. If you can help your communities back in India or work with the communities that you've got in the country that you live in, then please do so. Get engaged, get involved, learn about your history, learn about what role you can play, and love yourself, learn to love yourself, and many of us do. Dalits are very happy people, colorful people. They love to sing and dance. We have so much in common with African Americans as well. And let your beauty shine, let your brilliance shine. And I'd say that to many young people. Never let anybody else put a chip on your shoulder to say that you're not better than me, because that's their problem. It's not your problem. And, in many respects, a lot of the colleagues I work with, Santosh Das Ji, MBE, she's the chair of Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance, the chair of FABO, amazing woman, very inspirational. Dr. Raj Chand, GP, very successful and amazing leader. He led us for a number of years. Great work that he's done for his community here in the UK, and a whole range of others. You've got Lekpal, Satpal, and all the colleagues that have helped me and encouraged me. And Sam Kalyana, Ram Dhaliwal, all of these people, I work with them. They're all inspirationals. And, and what we have to do is help each other grow. So we've got wonderful role models in the community.
Yeah.
Right? We need to give ourselves more prominence, and that's one thing I love about your channel videos, that you're showcasing some great individuals and the hard work they're doing, and long may it continue in that respect.
So thank you so much, Ravi. You have outlined the vision and future plan also, and I'm very sure that people who will be watching this conversation will definitely get new ideas, and we have to go a long way. I hope in next, whatever, 5-10 years, we see your vision getting implemented and more people coming to the humanist ideals and embracing the worldview of Guru Ravidasji or Sant Kabir or Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Jyotiba Phule and Lord Buddha. So all this is like, the humanist word. And I think that will be the way towards humanizing the world. I say humanize India, humanize our societies, and humanize world.
Thank you, Vidiji. Jai Bhim, Jai Gurudev.
Thank you, Jai Bhim, Jai Gurudev.